Self-advocacy, the individual use of resources to meet one's needs and goals. The first thing you need to know is knowing when self-advocating is needed. When you're put in a compromised position where you no longer are in complete control of what your wants and needs are and your destination, then it is time for self-advocating. We do it on a daily basis, almost continually in some manner or another. It can be from the smallest things to asking for a receipt at a grocery store, to major things that have gone to the Supreme Court. One of the hardest parts about self-advocating is when you're doing it with family and friends. There's that bond there that's been established for a long period of time. When you discuss your diagnosis with your family and friends, they're going to have different attitudes towards how they feel about that. They may be good or bad, and may be beneficial to you or detrimental. Some family members and friends are going to think that you're a lot worse than you are the day before when you were diagnosed. And so you're going to have to advocate for yourself with your family and your friends to get your needs and wants met, and so that things that are basic human rights and needs are not taken away from you. An example would be driving. It's a big issue with a lot of people who have been diagnosed with dementia, and when it's time to stop driving. And your idea of when that may be, and when your family or friends' idea of when that may be, could be two different things. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have all the information that you need, that you've made a firm decision in your own mind as to whether or not you still want to drive. If you have decided that you do, and there is someone in your family or one of your friends that thinks that you are no longer capable, then you need to sit down and have a discussion with them and advocate for yourself as to why you believe that you still can function in that manner. Listen to them also, take note of things that they may be able to tell you have changed. Take all of that in, and then make up your mind as to whether or not you still believe that that is the best course for you. In the end, it's your choice as to whether or not you do this, unless the law prohibits you from doing it. You also have to self-advocate with professionals. This would be doctors and lawyers. Of course, one of the first things that we always hear is about getting our orders and affairs in order when we've been diagnosed. And so it's very important that we plan ahead before we have the meeting with that attorney and know what it is we want and need from them. And then make sure that by the end of that meeting that all of your wants and needs have been met. Another would be your doctor. Don't let the doctor have total control over your appointment with him. Make sure that you ask any questions that you have, and don't let the doctor dismiss you until you have full answers to those questions. If at the time you're kind of shocked by your diagnosis, you may want to go home and think through things and take notes, and then make an appointment with the doctor to go back in and discuss them with them and come up with ideas and answers to your questions. Again, that's self-advocating. It has a wide range. Self-advocating with the public is making sure that your human rights are not violated by people in the public, and that when somebody perhaps says something that's inappropriate, that you correct them and stand up for yourself that way instead of just letting it pass by. Sometimes you may want to pick and choose when that happens. There's some people that you can tell by their attitude that they're just not people that you want to get involved with and take that risk. but most of the time it's worth the risk, and we do want to educate people. An advocate is the assistant to another individual in meeting their needs and goals. The most important part of that is getting to know the wants, needs, and goals of the person that you're advocating for. This is an individual one-on-one advocating situation. It's very important that you leave your baggage at the door when you come in to talk to that person, that the conceptions that you have and what you believe is in the person's best interest is not always the same as what that person is wanting. And what you want to do is, as long as it isn't causing harm to that person or another person, you want to be able to help them meet their wants, needs, and goals by taking a position with them. And this would be in the state that you would be talking to a third party regarding the issues that they're involved in. When not to act as an advocate would be when it could cause harm to the person, and you weigh the risks and benefits, and you believe that the risks outweigh the benefits, and you just can't morally put yourself in the position to advocate for that person. In that case, you need to have a conversation with them, let them know why you're taking the action that you're taking, suggest that they find an ulterior means if that is still the course that they want to take in achieving something, and make sure you stand your ground, because if somebody was to get hurt and you changed your position because they had talked you into it, it could be a situation where you may likely not forgive yourself for the advice that you ended up giving. Group advocate. How do I start? The best way to start as a group advocate is to find another person or persons who have similar interests and like-mindedness to yourself. You can do that through the media now very easily because it's so widespread. You want to know what the needs of the group versus your individual needs are. It's very important that the group's needs are being met, but it's also important that your individual needs are being met when you're part of that organization. There are times that there are going to be issues that come up where one set of people are going to want to do things one way, and another side are going to want to do things another way. Usually this ends up being a majority rules type situation, and at that point you just need to agree to disagree. It doesn't mean that you have to change your mind and that you have to agree with what they're saying, but sometimes you have to take that step back and move forward with your organization by agreeing with what the majority wants. The other thing is you need to know when to forge ahead or break away. As I was saying, in forging ahead, that would be staying with your group or organization and moving forward onto other topics and other issues. The time to break away is if it's totally in conflict with your beliefs, then it may not be the right organization for you to be involved with. And at that time, you may want to consider breaking away and maybe finding other individuals who believe as you do, or another group that has similar interests and visions and goals. So when you start with an organization, you do want to know what their vision and their mission is, so that you could take that into consideration when you decide if that's something that you want to be a part of. And that was shorter than I thought it was going to be, and I'm going to turn this over to Kate.
Thank you, Jan. Fantastic. I think we can move straight on to from the first slide, Laura, but I mean, it takes a lot of courage to speak out, particularly when you're a marginalised group like people with dementia have been. So why speak out? My willingness to speak out has been fueled by the fact that since being diagnosed with dementia, much of the care feels symptom-based, and I often think that there's a thin veil between people with dementia being treated with dignity as opposed to being treated like morons. And I believe nothing will change until we understand the human cost of dementia. The other reason that I speak out is the only way you can understand me is to walk in my shoes. If I don't invite you into my world, then how can I reasonably expect you to know what it's like? So since being diagnosed with dementia, I've been told I can't possibly have it because I can still speak. I've had someone say, but you sound and look so intelligent. I've also had, as many others have had, that you must be lying about the diagnosis for whatever reason. And then I've been told by a well-meaning registered nurse that no matter what I do, it'll get me in the end. It's imperative that we speak out for our own rights. And I hope that by speaking out to break down some of the stereotypes and stigma and myths about the diagnosis of dementia. Christine Bryden, Richard Taylor, and many others living well with dementia have said the same thing. And living well with dementia seems to be a reason why so many people doubt that we have dementia. How extraordinary. If we were doing well with a diagnosis of cancer, everyone would applaud us. No one would question the diagnosis. It's really important that we keep speaking out. I also speak out because there is a gross underrepresentation of people with dementia deciding on our care and our futures. The Scottish Dementia Working Group have been speaking out and advocating for over 12 years now, borrowed the slogan from the disability sector, nothing about us without us. Those of us living with dementias who are speaking out also want to educate others about what living with dementia is really like, which was a reason for these masterclasses, and to raise awareness about it. We want to reduce the stigma, the discrimination, the isolation and the exclusion that have been the experience for far too long for people with dementia. We want to break down the myths and stereotypes and let other people diagnosed with dementia know that it is possible to live better lives than were prescribed upon diagnosis. On top of this, we've been so disempowered by the prescribed disengagement that speaking up for ourselves and others helps us to regain our confidence, to regain our identity, our self-esteem, and our power. It helps us to reclaim our pre-diagnosis lives. Next slide, thanks, Laura. So I guess why me? Sometimes I ask myself that practically every day some days. I suppose why not me? I can still speak. So I also feel a moral and ethical sense of duty to speak out while I still can. And definitely there are too few people with dementia speaking out around the world. I started to speak out because I was tired of people without dementia telling me how I felt, what it was like for me, and what was best for me without bothering to ask me. I continue to speak out because currently there aren't enough people with dementia speaking out. We don't get invited to speak at events. We're not being actively involved in public forums about dementia, not enough. Perhaps by being a role model and challenging the status quo, it will bring about change. During Dementia Awareness Month, it would seem logical to me that people with dementia all over the world would be included and fully involved in events, but it appears more often than not that we've just been used for organisations to tick a box or for fundraising and research. This is not fair, it's not equitable, and it simply exacerbates the stigma. I also do feel a moral and ethical responsibility to speak up for our rights. Perhaps it's just the human being in me or the nurse of caring about other people. That people are not being treated well as the norm, but rather as the exception. And therefore, I feel it's my duty while I still have a voice. From a very personal perspective, there's also a therapeutic value of writing or speaking out, which I've experienced before and believe it has helped kept away the black dog of depression. Can you go backwards, please, Laura? Thank you. So why speak out now? I think because our basic human rights as people with dementia have been stepped on for too long. I was told this week by somebody at an event that it's okay to discriminate against people with dementia. I don't accept that. And if that's what's happening during Dementia Awareness Month in 2014, then it seems we've still got quite a long way to go. It has still been and still is often very much about us without us. I also believe that advocacy and speaking out are non-pharmacological and positive psychosocial interventions for dementia.
Amen.
People with dementia must take control over their lives and futures and must take action. Otherwise, others retain the control over us. Dementia Alliance International is making a global call to action. It is the first international group where membership will remain exclusive to people with dementia. Empower yourself, empower others to speak up and to speak out, and strengthen the power of justice and improving our basic human rights. Next one. Thanks, Laura. That's my plan of action for when I speak out. It looks a bit complicated, but I do find it's really important if I'm speaking to a particular group to do things like identify the issue that they're interested in. Otherwise, if I'm speaking out about something they're not interested in, then they're not going to listen anyway. And as Jan said with advocacy, are you the right person to be doing it? Speaking out is advocacy. Sometimes you're not the right person to do it, sometimes you are. But also develop your story, define what you hope to achieve and by when. And I think that Dementia Alliance International is trying to do that as we set up this organisation. Definitely get all of the facts. Find other people who support you. Dementia Alliance International is full of people with dementia now. We're all supporting that vision of improving our human rights, improving our care in the community, improving our care in residential care. We have a very common goal. I think most importantly, don't give up, not ever. Thanks, Laura. Don't miss out. Yeah, we've recently updated our website and you can now sign up to receive our weekly blogs when they're published, so they'll come direct to your inbox if you've got an email. Just click on the blue button on the left-hand side of the screen. Oh, I seem to have the slides back to front, Laura, sorry. Just a little, I think we can skip that slide. Just repeating our vision, it's a world where a person with dementia continues to be fully valued. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever does. As you can see by this slide, where I've got green, blue and black, there are 3 buttons. The website was updated recently now, so it's easy to click on the button that you need to join up as a member or for the newsletter or the blog. So hopefully that's helping. And I think we can open it up for questions, unless you wanted to add anything, Jan?
No, I think asking question or the question segment is due now.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions? There's a lot of information there, and if anybody would like to go back to a slide, we can do that if we need to. And
I have a comment first, and that's that I think that Janet and Kate are doing a fantastic job Jean here and I were involved 12 years ago in trying to get a group for people with dementia together on the internet. And we were able to do that with message boards and occasional chats. But it's so nice to see you all taking off this. I'm just so excited for your alliance. This is really great.
Amen.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Jan, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What first inspired you to start speaking out about dementia?
Actually, I should have told a little more about my journey with dementia. I was diagnosed in 2004. At the time, I worked for the Advocate General for the state of Oklahoma in the United States, and I was a program administrator. I had worked as an advocate, as an investigator, and through our state grievance process, we saw the grievance system for all of the Department of Human Services. I also was a social worker for 7 years and dealt with aged, blind, and disabled people as well as long-term care. So I started speaking out for people through social work and then, of course, as an advocate. The advocacy part was through a federal court order where people from an institution who had been found to have been abused, neglected, and mistreated, the facility was closed and they were all moved to the community. And of course, community standards of care had to be set up as to what was the minimum expectations that the state would provide for those individuals who were getting moved. And my position was to go to meetings with or on behalf of these individuals and make sure that at least the minimum was being provided to. Self-advocacy, I did not start until 9 years into my diagnosis. The first 9 years I was extremely apathetic, frontotemporal degeneration, and it is a very common trait in the behavioral variant, which is what I have. I sat at home. My feeling from my neurologist was that I would not live more than 1 to 2 years, and so I was waiting to die. And finally, at year 9, I decided I wasn't dying anytime soon because I still felt the same as when I was first in the neurologist's office, except some memory issues. And so I went online and was able to find a couple of support groups that I joined and started discussing with the members in the group issues that were going on, and of course self-advocating and feeling like I was advocating by my responses to questions and concerns that other people in the group might have. And then I found an opening into whom I may concern, which was a production that's put on by people with dementia about what it's like to live with dementia. And the interactions that I had there were priceless. Actually, that's where I met Laura and Maureen Matthews, who I believe are mentors to me in coming out of the darkness and finding a lighter, brighter path. And then I finally started self-advocating and saying these are the things that I wanted and needed, instead of just passively letting life happen to me and letting others decide things for me. So that required discussions with family and friends, because they, of course, had been very used to me being very passive and just sitting with a blank stare and allowing whatever may be, to saying these are the things that I want and I need, and I won't accept less. So that's where I started self-advocating. Like I said, I believe I started advocating through the support groups, and then as far as organizational advocacy through Dementia Alliance International. Did that answer your question, Kate?
Yeah, thanks, Jan.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I think it's important because I certainly didn't speak out when I was first diagnosed, and I was 18 months or 2 years into it before I did, because you're so disempowered by the whole diagnosis and distressed and upset. And I think I found some excerpts of Richard's writings online which kind of saved my life, and his advice was to start writing about it, and that then empowered me enough to start speaking up about what I wanted, rather than being told by everybody else what was best for me. But it's a hard road to start, and definitely worth it once you do.
Yes, I'm going on 2 years now as a self-advocate.
Well done.
And I've learned a lot.
Yeah. Any questions? Anyone else?
I wondered if there's anybody out there who is, well, Jen, you described all different kinds of advocacy.
Yes.
You talked about joining a group, and I guess in your story, you found empowerment by being in a group, and then you became more of a self-advocate, and then you started advocating for others.
Yes.
So I'm interested in what stage some of the people are in who are in the audience today, if anybody would like to share. Yeah, Jeannie?
I'm in my 18th year of advocating, and I've been on a soapbox and done many, many, many lectures, and I just feel like every time I do one or every time I talk to someone, it just builds me up more into the fact that maybe now, after these 18 years or maybe 15 years that it really was going kind of slow, that now with you folks in here, it's like it's just a new life coming into it, which is really helping all of us to get out there and really, really speak out. And I'm very grateful for you all.
Thank you.
And we're grateful to have you as a part of our organization.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question? This is Pat. I obviously work in the health field, and I would be curious to know how much of a negative influence the way that your diagnosis was presented to you had. Or do you think that regardless of how the diagnosis was given, there would still be a time when you kind of had to almost close in and just digest it? I guess I would really like to know kind of your thoughts on that.
I'd like to speak first on that one.
Okay.
The time of diagnosis was so difficult for me. I knew that I had a problem, but I had no language to talk about what was happening, and no means of getting a diagnosis at all. So I got online and I met my first set of friends with the Dementia Advocacy and Support Network International. And my friends there told me what I needed to do in order to get a diagnosis at all. And the more we talked, the more I realized I definitely had the problem. I didn't have a differential diagnosis, but I knew I had some kind of dementia. So through a whole series of things, I couldn't even get my GP, general practitioner, to refer me for an assessment. So I had to pay out of pocket a couple $100 at a time when I was not working, had no future working again, in order to get a pre-screening, in order to be able to go to a doctor to get an assessment. I did get assessed, and I was told at that time that I had vascular dementia, and this was back in 2001. And from everything I could read and everything I could see, I was probably going to be around, I thought, another 2 or 3 years. Well, it's been many more than that. But if it hadn't been for my friends at the Dementia Advocacy and Support Network International, I'm not sure I would be here today at all. I was very, very close to suicidal at that point, and it was people like Jeannie that helped me to stay on board and hang on for another 18 months until I finally got some disability income, and have been able to work part-time jobs and all that kind of thing for all the rest of the years. And if it were not for people with dementia, I think some of us wouldn't still be around, and I'm the first one to say so.
I agree totally.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. My diagnosis ignited my anger, and to some degree, it still does, or it's anger, but it's anger modified and into doing things, and now that later, because the diagnosis was wrong. The diagnosis was wrong. I knew it was wrong. They refused to say it was wrong. He said I had Alzheimer's. I said no, and it cost me $500 to get somebody to tell me what I had, to do the testing that was required, that was visual, as opposed to being, they were testing the wrong things. I have a good memory, so it's, and that continues. I've seen that doctor again and again, and the last time he said, "Oh no, you don't have that, because the people that I know who have that are really sick, and you're not really sick." So it just continues. It's a refusal, and I just came through 10 hours or so of testing, because I put myself up for a volunteer at our center here, because nobody knows what I have, and they're not testing rightly, and they're losing some people. So I did that, and I was interested. I just got the response. It's the same kind of thing. Well, it all comes back to Alzheimer's, and it's all, ultimate, it's memory and impairment, this. And I mean, I was surprised by how much the testing on which they diagnose depends on some very, I don't know, there are things like, well, we're telling you you're impaired. You have really good meaning. You're like really excellent. You know what you're doing. You do it, but you do it too slowly. And I'm going like, isn't that a problem of the world right now? You're calling me impairment because I did everything right, but I did it slower. I don't get that. And I keep running into these kinds of things with how it would, to me, show how the medical people look at us, right? So if you do something a bit slower, are you impaired? I find that amazing. Anyway, so I found, the first thing that happened the next day after the doctor put in that I had that, I lost my license, right? They don't know what I have. They didn't know. I tried to get information from the traffic people, and they wouldn't even tell me what kind of doctor was going to have made that decision. So I had to, I had to be angry, and I just used, I said that I challenged them. They gave it back, and then the people who came about a week later, and they had a big letter that they wanted me to be, on trial when you go on for jury. Okay, so right at the bottom of this letter, it said, we want you, come on. At the bottom line, there was a line of the people they didn't want. And if you were one of them, you had to tell them. And the things that they didn't want were criminals, people who are addicts, and it went on. And then someone who's been diagnosed with dementia. I went, gee, thanks. That's really cool. And this stuff just kept rolling out. And that's what made me so angry. And it's so, if you did that, if a judge, someone did that to a criminal being, you know, it would be thrown out of court.
Mm.
But dementia doesn't matter. Those are the things that
You're a great example of a self-advocate.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that I keep running into that keep me going. It's going to be a long, tough haul, I think.
It's going to be a long life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I might add to that, just talk a bit about that, what happens to us when we're diagnosed, which I think sets us up to fail and die. A diagnosis of dementia is definitely not like a birthday party, but we don't have to die day one.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know about what happens in the States, but here we're told to give up, like for young people, give up work, go home and get your end-of-life affairs in order, and then live for the time you've got left, whatever that means, after you've given up everything you like doing. Yeah. And that sets up just a chain reaction of defeat and fear, which negatively impacts our ability to be positive, to self-advocate, and to be proactive for our health. It's the only disease, and it is a terminal illness, it's the only disease I know of where the healthcare professionals tell you to go home and give up and not fight for your life. If we were all diagnosed with cancer, we'd have been given all these treatment options, including holistic and non-pharmacological treatment options. Instead, people with dementia are told to go home and die, get ready for aged care and death.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
It sets us up to become victims, but it also sets our partners up to think they're going to have to take over everything for us. And many of us have proven that even though we might need support and assistance, there's still so many things we can do on our own. So it's important to advocate for ourselves and each other.
I agree.
If we'd all had a stroke, we'd have been sent for authentic brain injury rehab.
Yes.
Now, I don't know anybody with dementia who's been sent for rehab.
That I saw at an evening about all the wonderful things they were doing at the university for strike, because they're a big thing. And I was
amazing. Amazed. You should see the pathways they've got compared to us. Zero.
Well, what I was annoyed is because I've got a problem with speech, and they get free speech twice a week.
Yeah.
And we get none. There's
that's wrong.
Actually, here, it used to be, and Pat can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be if you had Medicare and you had dementia, you couldn't get speech therapy. But I believe they passed a change to it where, because it used to be you had to be able to improve a certain amount or something like that, but they passed a change so that people with dementia can now get speech therapy. Isn't that correct, Pat?
Yeah, well, what happened was that, yes, you're right, that there used to be some sort of clause, and I never was able to determine whether it was really a clause or whether it was the therapist's interpretation of the clause that said if you could not show that there was, significant improvement, then the therapy would be terminated. But what they, articulated more clearly is that no longer can be a criteria for denying service. But I don't know that the therapist's attitudes about it has changed. So realistically speaking, I don't know if anything different is happening. And it seems that that's the biggest blockade, is that it becomes a matter of the people that don't have dementia are the bigger problem than anybody that has dementia at whatever level the disease is, because everyone's attitude about it is just so horrible. And it's just amazing to me. And I use your analogy all the time, Kate, you know, the idea that if it was a diagnosis of cancer, you would treat people so differently. And what is it about this disease? And I don't know if it's just a fear or a misunderstanding.
It's possibly ignorant, Pat.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah.
Wow,
I think the irony is that a lot of us live longer than they do.
That's really interesting, Pat, because I hadn't heard that side of the fact that you got to change the attitude of the therapist for them to realize it's of value to the people with dementia. That's really interesting, but that's good to know.
I think about, I think I also got this from you, Kate, when we were at the conference in Puerto Rico, the idea of thinking about a diagnosis of dementia in the same way that you think about a disability. You know, that the responsibility of everybody is to accommodate the disability so that it becomes invisible. And yet we expect that we don't have to accommodate whatever happens when someone has dementia. You know, it's like if you're a physical therapist and your patient speaks Russian and you can't speak Russian, then that's not the fault. You know, it's not that the therapy can't work. It's just that you can't communicate appropriately.
Exactly. Yeah.
Back in 95, we were trying to change the attitudes of doctors because doctors just believed that there was a death sentence and that was what you had. And from then to now, it's not a whole lot different.
It's not much different.
It's not.
No, it is not. I used to talk about it as being, we're treated like dead men walking. Once you get your diagnosis, your life is over, and you're just moving around here, and we may let you move around, but aside from that, there's nothing we can do for you, so don't bother us. And that's just not right.
No. There should be a care plan defined for anyone that gets a dementia diagnosis, and there really isn't.
Right.
Laura, you're muted.
At one point, we were talking about people. I'm trying to remember whether this was Richard Taylor or maybe Peter Ashley in the United Kingdom. We were talking about people's rights to build for themselves a long-range, I was calling it an individual plan for living. Now, while I know that I need to watch what my routines are in a day and the things I like to watch on television and I don't, and who my family members are and whatever, I want to design how I need to be addressed and taken care of when I'm no longer able to speak as I can now. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why I stay muted here is that having been diagnosed in 2000, some of the things that I had wrong with me got better to the extent that 4 years ago, I started teaching college online again. Well, the college would not appreciate it if I had my name out publicly as somebody with dementia. So in a sense, I'm an imposter again. But that's what I got to do, hopefully, to get, to stay employed here and there. So anyway, I love the idea of an individual plan for living. That's our care plan, and we can do it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Along those lines, this is an open question to our presenters and other people with dementia in the audience. Do you feel any responsibility for advocating for people in the later stages of dementia who can no longer advocate for themselves? And I'm thinking in particular of an example of people in the later stages being given the medications to manage their behavior and being without consulting, obviously, with them or with their families, but in care homes and by doctors. That's that sort of thing.
Absolutely, and that's where advocating for another person comes in. There comes a point in our disease where we no longer self-advocate and we need an advocate. And hopefully wishes, wants, and needs have been turned over to that person, so that they're still advocating on our behalf when we lose our voice. And that discussion could take place. Do you want to be somebody who has violent tendencies and is not medicated? Or do you want to be somebody who is medicated so that you don't have violent tendencies? It's a hard question. For me, I would want to be medicated so I wouldn't have violent tendencies. But I don't think I'm in the majority.
I think though, Jan, that the majority of challenging behaviours, for want of a better word, the majority of those behaviours are nothing to do with the dementia. They're actually to do with an unmet need and an inability of staff in care homes to understand or communicate with the person with dementia.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I advocate really strongly for people with dementia against the use and abuse of psychotropic drugs, for example, because the one contraindication of using an antipsychotic drug is dementia. It's actually not good for people unless they've got a true mental illness that requires that drug. But to be used to behaviour modify is actually illegal. And it brings up a really important topic, is that all of us and everyone who's diagnosed with dementia, because of the nature of the disease, is that we probably will lose capacity later on. We should all do our advanced care directives and update our wills really quickly while we still know exactly what we want. And I advocate for that a lot, because the overuse and abuse of restraint, either pharmacological or physical restraint, being locked away or put into beds where the mattresses are so sunk down nobody can get out.
Take me for a walk.
All over the world.
I'm seeing the exact opposite of that right now. I have a friend who has a sister.
It's not going to change from one day to the next. And if I'm put in a situation where I don't have the staff that I need, I don't have the interactions that I need, and I'm having these behaviors because of it, if you can't change my situation, I don't want to live as a person who has violent tendencies.
I agree with that, but we need to change the system.
Catch-22, which we have a lot of. We have a lot of catch-22s with our diagnosis.
Yeah,
but what I don't agree with, and I hear of going on wholesale, is the care centers getting the doctor that is like their doctor to prescribe psychotropic drugs to keep their staff ratios down, especially at night.
that's what's happening.
And that is just beyond horrible. It's just,
Some of them have their own quack.
yeah. Yep.
I guess most of you have heard this one when, and it should be on a poster, I think, in every care facility. It says the patient is not giving you a hard time. The patient is having a hard time.
Exactly, Amy.
And I did not invent that. I read it. But I volunteer in an adult day
I'm going to
health
use
center.
that.
I didn't write it. I read it. I volunteer in an adult day health center, and the question of treatment when people are getting farther along in this disease is personal to me, obviously. And I feel the need to speak up sometimes as far as, well, maybe we don't need to sit the person in the corner even though the person can't do this craft. We'll just have the person see if they want to come over and join us anyway. Just really simple things like that. But I so understand all that you're saying, but just one addition. I have a really rare opportunity right now because I'm on the National Board of Advisors for the Alzheimer's Association. What I've really noticed is, yes, we're given a voice, but it better be within the parameters of their comfort. And if it isn't in the parameters of their comfort, then discount you.
That's exactly
pretty much all the time, Amy.
We just have to make everyone comfortable, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've said this, I think, to this group before. I think that you guys are the ones that have to keep saying that's not right. I always think Joan Rivers used to always say that comedy was like that. Comedy is meant to make people feel uncomfortable and get you to think about things. And so
Yeah.
I think you guys are the ones that have to keep pushing and saying, it may be what the world has been thinking for the last 15 or 20 years, but that doesn't make it right.
No, that's right.
It's one of those things. Absolutely, I agree with you. But it's one of those, and I have to say a but. One of those things is that you have to still be heard from an audience. Mm-hmm. So if you become the jerk, and you're always saying, even though you mold your words into an acceptable, not non-bashing, you still have to watch how much you say, how much you demand an audience, or you won't be heard at all. You won't be called into working. It's the same in lots of personal interactions. So yeah, you have to pick your battles.
But I don't think of any of you as rude and obnoxious when you're making your points.
Give you an example.
We're very pleasant.
Yeah,
I am pleasant. I'm very pleasant. But we were in a meeting, and it wasn't dementia friendly, and I spoke up, and the response was, "Well, no one's ever said that before." So it was absolutely inferred that I was the only one ever to have thought that wasn't dementia friendly, which is just BS. Right. No one spoke up, and you have to watch whether you. It's, if anyone has advice, I used to light fires everywhere. And at some point you're not listened to because, here she comes.
Yeah, I can relate to that, Amy.
Yeah, it's hard.
What in my country, the national organization that has an advisory board of people with dementia has an arrangement whereby you can be on the advisory board for 1 year. Mm-hmm. And they've been through 4, maybe I've lost track even now, years. Each year that group changes over. Right. And 1 year they had somebody on the advisory board who knew well enough to be able to look at what the national organization was saying it was doing with its time and money at their actual expenses and the way they allocated their money. And the two did not match. And they were so happy to have that person off of their advisory board. Yeah. And we tried to form an organization of the people who had been on that board so that we could try to hold them to account. If they told John this in 2007, then Fred in 2009 is going to be asking the same question. And we just were not successful in getting that together. Now,
we have the same situation.
With the Alliance, you all may be able to make this happen.
We have the same situation where we have a 1-year term, so there's no history. Right. And when you're all over the country, the communication is not good. We meet together twice in a year. So to make change, I don't care who you are. It's just hard without any continuity or history.
Sure.
Well, I think that's very deliberate on the part of the organization. Mm-hmm. Their intention, they say, is make people feel good for this year. And then let's go make a few other people feel good. That has nothing to do with a national organization being accountable to the people who have dementia.
It's all to do with them ticking the box to say they're including it.
Yeah, quite ironic that they call it an advisory committee, yet they really just kind of want you to rubber stamp their agenda. They don't want
Amen.
They don't want to tell you want you to tell them how to do anything.
I'm delighted that Australia is not like that now. So they are taking our National Advisory Committee seriously, which is fantastic, and funding it.
And Kate, I think you're a lot to do with that because you won't take no for an answer.
Thanks, John.
I need lessons, Kate. I'm on the advisory board in Hawaii, and it's like I don't even know what I am. I'm like a nobody.
Are you the only one?
So hard. I'm the only one with dementia. Yes.
Oh, maybe we should have a Skype chat one day.
Yes, that would be nice.
Well, Jean had the problem before of even after she gave the organization in Hawaii all of her information, all of her medical stuff, they continued to maintain that she didn't have a problem, so she didn't belong. Now, you talk about stick-to-itiveness. She's still at this. Jean, how many years has it been?
18.
18. And now she's actually on their advisory board. I mean, that's making progress in some respects.
A couple people died.
Right.
That's how it happened. The ones I didn't like got out. Maybe because of me, what the heck.
You outlived them, didn't you?
I did. Somebody taking care of me.
How do you find opportunities to speak out? Amy, you've got kind of a controlled speaking out.
Well, I didn't always, though.
No, you didn't. How do you?
I started speaking out here in Spokane, and I went to the association, and I began, and I put myself on their board of directors, and then I went to their classes, and I spoke out in the audience and told them I had the disease, and all of a sudden, everyone wants to listen to me, not a bunch of talking heads that are reading from slides that don't have the disease. So that's really, use your power that way. You have a lot of power if you announce that you have it. Sitting in an audience and just saying, I have the disease, wow, I took the fire right out of the speaker's mouth.
Yes, that happened before.
You do have to speak up, Laura. I attended a conference, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, interstate, and the final session on day one was a panel about the sexuality of people with dementia. And they had a journalist, they had a carer, they had some woman who'd written a book about sexuality and dementia, and somebody else, and they hadn't bothered to include a person with dementia, even though there were at the conference.
Well, they don't have any sex.
We sat through, I sat with another person with dementia, and we sat there hearing in a public forum what our sexuality was and wasn't, and how bad it was, and all these horrible, horrible things. And I stood up at the end, and by the end I was outraged, and I said I was outraged that I didn't think it was appropriate that in such a public venue and such an intimate personal topic, they should have had a panel without including a person with dementia. Now, the conference organisers didn't get the point. They were actually annoyed at me. But a lot of people in the audience came up, a lot of care workers and registered nurses and service providers came up and said they were really enjoying that session until I spoke up. And then they felt ashamed that there wasn't a person with dementia up there. But I tell you what, I got a lot of negative flack from doing that. So you've got to be a bit tough. I think it's the farm girl in me. You know, I've been kicked by a horse, so, you know, they can kick me too. But it's, you know, we need to speak up. How dare they speak about sexuality of people with dementia with us in the room and not include us?
Right.
And you do have to be tough-skinned to speak out.
You do.
A lot to stand up and speak out. And fortitude, sometimes more than what you think you have. And until you start using that, you don't realize how much power you have.
No, that's right.
So we're standing up in the audience, and Amy, you said you put yourself on the board of directors. I hear a lot of, you have to just get out there. And Kate, are you getting invited now to speak, or are you still having books?
And I have been for a couple of years now. So 2.5 years ago, I was invited over to New Zealand for their biannual Alzheimer's conference as their keynote speaker. And then again, they've invited me this year. So in November, I'm there. And I mean, next week, I'm speaking in Perth as an invited speaker. The week after in New South Wales somewhere, a couple of weeks ago at a nurse practitioner. So I get a lot of invitations to speak now. And because I have kind of drawn up a disability or social care model of supporting people with dementia, which I presented at that conference in Sydney a couple of months ago, I've now had invitations from the disability sector as well, because in Australia, eventually people under 65 will have to be using the National Disability Scheme here, and they need to learn about caring for people with dementia. So, you know, using a disability model of care where you support the disabilities and help someone to continue living is the way I've managed myself, and they're really interested in it. So you eventually, it started for me accidentally. I'd written a story about living with dementia when I was first diagnosed that ended up being published in a magazine, and then the Alzheimer's Society here asked me would I present to a group of care workers, and then from there somebody else asked me. So it's kind of taken off without me wanting it to. But to present at conferences like ADI, that's always been by submitting abstracts, which is not necessarily, you don't know you're going to get a gig, and it's difficult to get into that sector. But next year, the Alzheimer's Disease International Conference here in Australia is going to have keynote speakers as people with dementia. So that's, you know, not just a token one, but every single day, which I think is fantastic.
Great.
So Helen's been invited from Munich, which is good.
Have any of you been successful at reaching out to physician associations or groups that are willing to listen to you all?
Jeannie? Yeah.
I was invited to a physicians conference in China. I have sent, I did not accept because I couldn't get around to it, but I have sent many letters and lots of things that are happening here, and lots about DASN, the group that I belong to and was on the board of directors. And I have sent a lot about Dementia Alliance International now. And the lady who I sent all the information to has called me, and she said that she is putting together a program without me, but by me, and giving it, there's 14 doctors, and she's giving it to all the doctors to read, and then talking to them about how they can include it in their conference, which is in the middle of October. So it's on the line, but it's a pretty strong thing going right now. And the doctors are from all over the world, not just from China.
I got an opportunity to speak to a group of doctors in the small town that I lived in. There were doctors from maybe 2 hospitals. It was not large. But I went to make the statement that people with dementia are not given the information that they need even to talk about the things that happen to them. I think many of us, if we learn the terms that are there that have to do with neuropsychology, like agnosia and aphasia and those kinds of things, once we had the language to talk about what was going on with us, it gave us much more in terms of being able to cope with it, find accommodations, things like that. And the response I got from the doctors was, well, but you're not typical. And it's like everything I'd said was dismissed. If you don't have typical blood pressure, do you not have blood pressure?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm trying to do things locally, and I'm just surprised at the lack of information. Just in the medical, they're all keen on research. There is brain places all spudding out all over, the province and Canada. But the researchers are very, very turned, just like the cancer people, on causes, and yet there's not one that matches, at least in PCA that I can see, the one in England where they're actually doing the research and turning around right away with what they could do to make the, going to the electrician or going to the lighting interest or going to the people that could make things that would be helpful. So it's like research going to the cure instead of, I think there's lots of that, but I don't see a lot of research going to a better life.
And this is, where are you that you're seeing this?
Canada.
Oh, because there's a lot of clinical trials in the U.S. that are focusing on treatment. Quite a few of them.
There's not much stuff happening for living well with dementia, though.
Yeah.
And so what kind of research? I guess I'm not understanding.
Engineering, lighting, all those kinds of things that you can telephones, involving telephones, and all those things that could make life easier.
Well, that's not really research. That's
it is for some of it.
Fortunately, have to be backed up by research a lot of the times in order to be implemented or for anybody to take you seriously. But yeah.
I'd like to see the well-being stuff and rehab researched a lot more.
Yes. Yeah. I think of the world right now as, for people with dementia, as where we were in the 1970s, perhaps, with people who are restricted, their movement is restricted, they're restricted to wheelchairs, and we didn't have sidewalks where people could get from the street on the sidewalk. We didn't have buttons for people to open doors. We didn't have doors wide enough to allow wheelchairs to go through. All those things that we just take for granted now, they're not there yet for people with dementia because it's not treated as a disability.
Oh, but again, that's not scientific research. That might be sociological research that is then put into implementation by governments. That's not scientific research.
But they want to see the research before they commit the funding.
Yeah, and medical isn't just the only research.
No, that's right.
And I just heard within the last couple of days that about 40% of the funding that was ever available through the National Institutes of Health right now is gone. There are labs, research labs all over the country that are going begging because the scientists who spent all this time getting trained to be scientists can't get the funding to do the research they know how to do.
Right.
So we're very much without the kind of research that we need.
Yeah.
I was at one point involved in a project. This was wonderful. I got involved with a group that was trying to determine whether using neurofeedback loops to your brain could affect the way you can do certain kinds of cognitive functions. And the guy brought his program to my house and he set it up in my computer, and I wore a headset, and if I was thinking the way I was supposed to and the blood flow was going where it needed to, then I could keep the video in front of me playing. If my mind wandered or I did whatever wrong I wasn't supposed to do, the screen went dark. It was a fascinating thing. That's something any of us could have done at home, but the money isn't there for that kind of thing to happen anymore.
Yeah, my example is light, because there hasn't been, it's all been on memory, right? And things like that.
Right.
And what kind of light is attacking the brain, all the different kinds of lights and computers online, on eyes that create problems for the brain, which is dementia, which is the area that I'm interested in. Yeah. Not much going on.
How many of you have had issues with your family when it comes to advocating for yourself, and have backed away from your position because of their feelings?
I have not backed away. My family has had my medical and legal power of attorney for at least 5 years, maybe longer. But right now, I am just within the last day or two thinking about revoking that power of attorney because I don't agree with the things that they're saying and how they're handling their own health situations. I'm thinking, why do I want to give them this power when I don't agree with the way they're handling their own lives. So I know that when I do that, if I revoke that power of attorney, it's going to be very hurtful. You know, my siblings will be just, I'm sure, devastated. But I'm kind of devastated at having been left here and letting things just sort of go as they will because they're busy having other lives. So that's a big issue. It really is.
Carol, what helped you make the decision to turn that over to them in the first place?
Well, when I turned it over initially, I was at a crisis point because I was hospitalized and had to have surgery, heart surgery, and it was marginal whether I would live through it and all that. So it just made sense in that emergency to get it all set up. And now it's been, well, I don't really want to mess with it, even though I'm not comfortable with it. But so that's where we've gotten to right now, is that I'm really not happy with it, but it still sits as it does until I make some really, it will be hurtful to do that to them. I know it will, and I don't want to damage the relationship.
Even if you put it to them that you were in a crisis situation at the time and that's now resolved?
Well, they have not been meddling in all these years since then, so there's really been no need to do anything different. Although I've expressed some needs to them recently and not had a good response at all. So now that's my new emergency. It's not a medical one, it's a personal one.
That's a great example of where self-advocacy starts.
Mm-hmm.
With the thought process and making the determinations and knowing what you believe to be in your best interest.
Right.
Good luck with that. I hope that works out well for you.
Thank you.
Amy, you raised your hand. Are you still having problems, or sorry, you're the only one who raised your hand? Not my fault.
No, it's not, Jan. Mine's a little different. I have two daughters in their 20s, and because I'm younger onset, as many of you are, that presents those issues of adult children that are really in their 20s and they're not fully developed, as most of you understand, maybe from just yourself. One of the things that is a challenge in my family is that I not only have Alzheimer's disease, I am living, breathing, doing Alzheimer's disease. So I'm on the webinar today, I'm speaking, it becomes overwhelming. And I think part of my daughter's responses are that, do I have to change this much? I don't know how to say that any better. I have the disease, but Mom works at the disease all the time. And I'm sure that it's too much for them. So that's hard on my advocacy. It is.
Have you sat down and had a discussion with them about it?
I have tried to, and it's just hard.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's just hard.
Amy, I have something to say to you. My daughter, well, I have 5 children, but my daughter is mostly in it. And now she's a bit over 20, but all of a sudden she's saying, every time I'm giving a lecture, every time I'm involved in a group, she says, you change into a different person. It's wonderful, Mom. It's wonderful, wonderful. So maybe a little age will help.
Maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. One of my sons attended a workshop in Sydney with me a few weeks ago on the impact of younger onset dementia on our kids. And it seems that there's been very little support or advocacy for the children of people with younger onset. And, lots of them have, dropped the bundle, done drugs, run away from home, etc., etc. And the question I asked my youngest son who came with me was, did my speaking out make it better for him or worse for him? And he said that some days it made it easier to cope with because his friends or parents of his friends who'd heard me speak were more caring towards him and understood more about the disease, but that at other times, sometimes having me speak out just meant that he could never get away from it.
Yeah.
So it's a real catch-22 for your family.
Yes.
Yeah, my son tells me I've got the same 2 and 20s there. Did the same thing. They're very proud, but he gets to the point where he says, "Look, Mom," because he himself is working in a brain project. Yeah. He said, "I have it at work. I have it here. Can we just stop?"
Yeah, sometimes they just need to switch off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just so you know, Laura, I've got to go in 5 minutes.
You're muted again,
Laura.
Yeah.
So yes, I think so. I was thinking that we should wind up too.
Yep.
It's been almost an hour and a half of some very good discussion and presentations, and it's I'm continually amazed that how much people with dementia learn from each other, and that's a form of really informal advocacy that we don't really realize is going on all the time. And
every time we talk to each other.
Yeah, I don't think the experts realize how much of this is going on, and that so therefore they would not question why it's necessary and what is happening that is causing that.
They better watch out, because here we come.
Yeah, exactly, Jan.
I'm warning them. I'm warning them that you're coming. Every chance I get.
Oh, wait. That'll mess up the surprise attack, Pat.
I'm trying to focus.
To ambush.
When does TAI get invited to Advocate Health to speak at? Do you ever have conferences or anything?
We haven't so far. We've never done anything like that, but we've just hired, we have a new physician that's coming on in December that is a behavioral neurologist from Northwestern University that has specialized in this area. And he seems like, based on the conversations that I've had with him, a person that really gets it and understands it from the perspective that you all are sharing. So I'm really hoping that there's possibility that it's going to start making a little bit of a difference as he interacts with the primary care physicians. So stay tuned. Maybe there's some hope that something will change.
Okay.
Yeah. In Australia, next week I'll speak to, this will be my 5th time speaking to the federal government about dementia and living well and what services we do and don't need. So we're getting traction in this country, which is great.
Wow.
What's the membership like for Dementia Alliance International?
We're at around 70.
Okay. I've been curious and just kept forgetting to ask.
Well,
yeah.
You might say that that's not, sounds like it's not a lot. Is that
it is a lot of people with dementia. It is actually a lot of, if you had carers, you'd have thousands, but
yeah.
That's why we need to advocate for more members.
Yes.
Well, but then it's spread just by word of mouth. I think 70 is really very significant because it hasn't.
A lot of organizations have, they say, oh yes, it'd be great. We'd love to have people with dementia and we want to have more people in programs, but how do we reach them? And some programs have been canceled because they don't know how to reach people. So I think we're learning. So I have done pretty well in only 8.5 months. So
we've done amazingly well. Yeah. Sorry, I have to go. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Dave.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to end here, and thank you so much, everybody. And
thank you.
Recording if you want to watch it again.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.